Hello and welcome to Deadline Day on Sky Sports. Welcome to Sky Sports' Premier League YouTube channel, where we're doing a stream for the next hour, brought to you by Sky Mobile, to dissect the latest deals and wonderful transfers potentially going on this very fun deadline day so far. To try and make sense of it, we've got Mikey McCubbin from Sky Sports. Mikey, are you surviving?
Just about, Dukes. It's been pretty hectic today, been pretty hard to keep up, but we're going to endeavour to keep up with it over the next hour, and who knows, maybe there'll be some big deals breaking in the next hour too. So stay tuned.
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun. Mikey will be keeping abreast of your questions, so make sure you get them in the chat. And to make sense of the day, we've got a representative of the busiest club of this window and the last few windows. Matisse, welcome to the show.
Pleasure.
Chelsea fan. You guys are in the thick of it once again.
Yeah, blink and you might miss it. That's literally what it is. The whole window has just been, signing after signing. There's a lot of outgoing still to do today as well. We obviously have the headline story that we're keeping an eye on. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun. Let's go to, we're going to be keeping you abreast of a number of deals. Toney, Sancho, Sterling. But Mikey, one of the big talking points today is Victor Osimhen. There's a potential move to Chelsea on the cards. There's a potential move to Saudi Arabia on the cards. Yeah. What's going on?
This has been a bit of a mad one today. This morning it felt like Osimhen to Ahli in the Saudi Pro League was really on the cards. That €80 million offer from them accepted by Napoli. Of course, at the same time as this, a £40 million offer accepted by Brentford for Ivan Toney to go to the same club, with Toney, now nearly completing his medical in London ahead of a potential move there. But back to Osimhen, it felt like Chelsea's top striking target of the window was falling out of reach. But since then, and since the developments with the Toney deal, it's transpired that Ahli cannot sign both at this moment in time, or at least cannot register both, because they've got 9 foreign players in their squad, 9 foreign players over the age of 21, that is, and Saudi Pro League rules are that you are not allowed to have more than 10 foreign players over the age of 21 in your squad. And so before Monday's Saudi deadline, transfer deadline that is, they would need to offload someone in order to get both players registered, whether that be someone like Roberto Firmino, for example, who does play at centre forward for them at the moment. But all the intel that we've received so far from various reports, from various journalists, is that they are not planning to sign both players. And so now it feels like the door could be open for Chelsea to sign Osimhen. The hurdle that they face, as well as meeting Napoli's valuation of him, is the wage structure that they currently have. Under Todd Boehly and Clear Lake Capital, they've developed this incentive-based wage structure, which helps ensure that they can tie down players to long contracts. And that's the polar opposite of what Ahli are offering, which is believed to be around, $650,000 a week tax-free. Obviously crazy. A massive increase on his Napoli wages, which are already incredibly high. So Chelsea's obstacle there is if they can convince Osimhen to, become part of a more measured wage structure at Stamford Bridge, because otherwise I think Osimhen would potentially be keen on a deal. It means he can stay in a top 5 league. He joins a Chelsea project which has been hectic over the last couple of years, but boasts an array of attacking talent. The likes of Pedro Neto, Cole Palmer linking up with Osimhen is pretty mouthwatering from my perspective. But I guess with that, Matisse, Osimhen to Chelsea, would that be a dream end to this transfer window? What do you make of Chelsea's window in general as well?
I think from just this particular instance, it's a very well played by Chelsea in regards to the striker situation, because, like you said, there was never going to be a case where Toney and Osimhen both went to Saudi, and Chelsea were always going to get to pick up the pieces, so to speak, of whoever doesn't go. So they were linked with Toney briefly as well, and they may have moved for him if they didn't get Osimhen. And I think Osimhen's camp, they've always spoken about he wants to be one of the best in the world. He wants to challenge himself. He wants to be one of the top strikers and be regarded in that way. And to do that, you need to be at centre stage. You need to be performing in the top 5 league. You need to be aiming to get back into Champions League, which is what Chelsea want to do this season as well. So for me, it only makes sense from him from a career standpoint, non-financial, to come to Chelsea. And Chelsea are the only team that have really been interested. PSG are floating about as well, but they kind of had talks broke down. I don't know if they're going to come back in today. Hopefully they don't. But I think Chelsea have played this very well, and if he can fit in within the wage structure, I think it's good for him also, because I still feel like he needs to prove. Obviously, he won the Scudetto, he did very well with Napoli, but I still think he's got to prove that he is a bona fide world-class striker of the likes of Aguero previously, you know, when we had them in the Premier League. I still think there's a level to go for Osimhen. So for me, with Chelsea have signed so many players this summer, and a lot of those players have not been starting 11 kind of players. They've been players that have maybe gone out on loan, or they've been, you know, depth, Dewsbury Hall. Anybody that they bring in that is a starting 11 level player that can instantly improve the team, whether it's my preference profile-wise or not, I'm going to give that credit, because that is what Chelsea need to start doing if they're going to take a hold of top four. They need to improve the starting 11.
Yeah, absolutely. I tend to agree as well. I mean, Nicholas Jackson had a really solid first year in the Premier League as well, but you can't just rely solely on one out-and-out number 9. You don't expect Christopher Nkunku to pick up more minutes, but it's not potentially his natural position. Joao Felix as well, maybe a little too lightweight for that position, so another number 9 does feel like a good option. If you can't get Victor Osimhen and you end up with Ivan Toney, for example, how do you prioritise that? Do you see Ivan Toney as a considerable downgrade on Osimhen, or would a lot of Chelsea fans be happy with Toney?
My preference actually would have been Toney, purely because not only have I watched more of him, but I think in terms of linking up play, he's very good at that. He's very good at, you know, passing, providing options for others in terms of facilitating, I would call it. Whereas I look at Osimhen as more of an outlet. He's the end to the build-up. He's the end to the chance creation, which is fine, because Chelsea have Pedro Neto, like you said, Felix, Palmer. But when you've had Lukaku previously, didn't really work out, maybe didn't fit the way that Chelsea wanted to play under Tuchel, etc. It's just PTSD popping up for me, where I know at least with Toney, I'm guaranteed to get someone whose first touch is, you know, very much ready to receive quick passes that we saw Jackson controlling really well against Wolves. His general play will allow others to get goals. And I think with Chelsea, if they were to spread the goal load out this season, I think that would be fine. When you've got Neto, Madueke got 3 goals already on his name in the Premier League when he had 5 last season. Palmer shown that he can get goals. I think Chelsea don't have to necessarily go direct to one man and ask them to get 20 goals. But yeah, I think if Toney was to come in previous season where he put up 21 goals, obviously we know last year he missed a large chunk of the season due to the ban, but I think he's ready to also lead the line as well. So I wouldn't look at that as a downgrade.
Have you been surprised, Mikey, that, you know, Ivan Toney, everyone knows his contract situation, that it has come to deadline day for his future to be resolved? You know, Thomas Frank talking a couple of weeks ago now that it looked likely that he was going to leave the club, but yet here we are still with, 6 hours left of the window, or just under 6 hours, and his future's not quite sewn up yet.
Yeah, it's a funny one, isn't it? I think, you know, there was so much talk of him potentially going to Arsenal. You know, Brentford's valuation of him was always very high as well, and I think it's one of those ones where it maybe came a year or two too late with Ivan Toney. You know, a bit of a late bloomer in terms of a striker coming into the Premier League. You know, the fact that he's English as well has always meant that there's been a bit of a premium on his price tag, as well as the fact that he's been so important to Brentford staying in the Premier League, at least up until last season, where, you know, the likes of Wissa and Mbeumo really came to the fore in his absence. So I think it's just a number of factors that have contributed to this. You know, the fact that, you know, Brentford have always held out for a fairly decent fee, the fact that his contract's up next year, his age as well. I think most Premier League clubs who would be looking at him, you know, nowadays, you know, clubs are a bit smarter in that sense. They see a player who doesn't seem to have an intention of signing a new contract with 1 year left on his deal, and they're happy to wait for a year and get him for free. You know, it's only a club like Ahli who seem to have really stuck their neck out and said, you know, yeah, 40 million on the table, which is, you know, a great fee for Brentford, considering the service that they've received from Toney. Of course, Igor Thiago was a ready-made replacement for him, now out for 6 months, and that's a shame. But generally speaking, I think Brentford can now survive without Toney, and this is a massive bonus if this deal goes through to Ahli.
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, we're going to be keeping you abreast of that situation throughout today's stream. If you've got any questions for Mikey, Matisse and myself, get them in the chat. But another situation we are definitely keeping on top of is the Jadon Sancho situation. Now, Sky Sports News' Dharmesh Seth, an absolute legend here at Sky Sports, he has given the latest on this deal. He says Chelsea are understood to have made an offer for Man United forward Jadon Sancho. Sky Sports News has been told that it is a loan that could become an obligation if certain thresholds are met. The loan fee is thought to be more than what Juventus originally offered, who were linked with Jadon Sancho as well. Talks are obviously continuing before the 11 p.m. deadline tonight. But Matisse, you've signed a number of wingers in the last few windows. Are you surprised that Chelsea are considering signing Jadon Sancho?
Yeah, I think when majority of Chelsea fans, when we came into this window, we were looking at certain positions that we needed to prioritise. And I think after signing Neto and bringing in Felix, I wouldn't say winger is a priority, that's for sure. We're definitely, stockpiling on wingers at this point, and we're definitely having maybe unhealthy competition, because players of this calibre, with this name, they still need minutes, they still need to feel involved. And I wouldn't want Sancho to be in a situation next summer where he's not part of the plans after a year because he hasn't had the opportunity or he's not worked out. So the only reason for me why this deal was looking like it was going to materialise is because Sterling was going to be involved, and at least then it's a one in, one out situation. We know that Sterling's kind of been pushed to the side in regards to, this season he's not going to be involved. The manager's made that very clear with him and quite a few other players as well. And the wages that he's on are very high. It's over 300,000, and Chelsea want to bring their wage bill down, and they're trying to align their wage bill across the whole squad. So that is probably why Benjamin Chilwell, who's had injury issues as well, is probably also looking to move away, because his wages as well have been an issue. So for me, Sancho's going to come in with less wages than he's on at Man United. Sterling would be going to Arsenal or Manchester United also on less wages, and that would kind of make sense. But if Chelsea are just going to sign Sancho outrightly, with nobody going out the other way, no guarantee, say the window shuts now and Chelsea have brought in Sancho and Sterling's still at the club, I mean, that's just for me too many players. So yeah, I think it makes sense if it's a swap, but if it's not, it's a gamble.
I can definitely, agree with you on that. Although, Mikey, it is worth pointing out that Jadon Sancho, when he joined Man United, he was, long seen as that right-wing solution, as it were, in that position. It had been a problem position for Man United for a number of years. This was a guy that was compared to Mbappe in his early days at Borussia Dortmund. I think it's fair to say it hasn't worked out at Man United, and there's been issues off the pitch, there's been issues with the manager. Would you be sad to see him go as a Man United fan, or do you think this is a good opportunity to lose his wages for a season and potentially, move him on permanently next summer?
Yeah, well, it seems to be that if a deal's struck, that it probably will be, like you say, a loan with an obligation to buy if certain conditions are met. So it does feel like that would be, if not the final, then probably, I think, despite what's, the disappointment of his time at Man United, I do feel like that if Sancho was to join Chelsea, it could only get better. Mm-hmm. Like I just feel like attacking wise, as many problems as Chelsea may face over this season, it just does feel already like that Chelsea attack is pretty good, and it looked pretty good under Pochettino last year as well, let's remember. So, at least in an attacking sense, I feel like Sancho feels like he'll be more at home at Chelsea rather than United, where the attack has been dysfunctional. There hasn't really been a focal point, or at least a fully fit focal point on a consistent basis. Rashford's form has fluctuated, hasn't it? Garnacho's still developing. Antony's transfer hasn't worked out either. It's been a little bit messy up top for United, whereas Sancho, if he can get some game time, and that's the problem, I guess, just so much competition, like Matisse was alluding to, I think there's still more for him there. He's a Chelsea fan as well. In that sense, it does feel good. But yeah, I'd be sad. I'm sad for the fact that it didn't work out at United. United, like you say, signed such a big prospect back in 2021 for big money. Double figures for goals and assists in his first 2 full seasons at Borussia Dortmund. He was absolutely electric. But whereas he's always looked incredibly at home on the right wing at Borussia Dortmund, even back on loan there last season. Remember his performance against PSG that got them into the final. Was it like 9 or 10 dribbles he completed?
It's the most ever completed in a knockout game since Lionel Messi in, I think about 2010.
Yeah, absolutely insane. This is someone who, was absolutely at home on the right there and in the Bundesliga, but for whatever reason, he just doesn't seem to be able to produce that form in the same position in the Premier League. I think as soon as Ineos backed Ten Hag, for another season. It felt difficult for Jadon Sancho to get back into this side because, away from any personal disputes away from the pitch that the two may have had, Sancho's just never looked like a starting 11 player in a Ten Hag system for whatever reason. So it feels like it's inevitable. Is Chelsea the best move for him? I'm not so sure. I think maybe Juventus would have been a better stylistic fit for him. He's already proved that he can, move abroad and thrive. I think a new league might have been a nice clean break for him. But he is London-born, like I said, Chelsea fan as well. I think in that sense, I think it makes sense for him. But it just depends how much game time he's going to get because, if he's going to play in a 10, then he's going to be vying with Cole Palmer and Kunku, Dewsbury Hall. If he's on the right, there's competition there as well. Noni Madueke coming up for hat-trick. It's just so stacked in that forward line. Just quickly before we move on, though, we do have a poll going out that is live in the chat about Osimhen. Is he going to end up at Chelsea before the deadline tonight? Currently, you all at home are voting 52% in favour of him not signing for Chelsea.
It's tight.
It's tight. It was actually 53% in favour of him joining Chelsea earlier. So, please
People
vote
getting
in
cold
the poll.
feet with the hours ticking down, clearly. It's a tight one, though. Get involved with the poll. Also, get your questions in the chat. We will endeavour to answer the best ones. Just to give you an update on where these deals are at the moment, Dharmesh Seth of Sky Sports News say Chelsea have made an offer to Man United for Jadon Sancho. It's believed to be a loan with an obligation to buy. Ivan Toney, Ahli, have had a bid accepted by Brentford. He has completed a medical there, but it is unclear whether they can sign both Ivan Toney and Victor Osimhen. And Makabin, the latest with Victor Osimhen from a transfer to Ahli perspective is that they've had a bid accepted from Napoli.
They've had it been accepted, 80 million euros this morning. But with the Ivan Toney deal at a far more advanced stage at this point, it feels like that's more likely to happen. And so, the door does seem to be a little bit ajar for Chelsea. There were some reports earlier that Chelsea have a delegation in Napoli, but they're waiting for Osimhen to give the green light on personal terms.
And then it's go.
And then it's all go. But it requires Osimhen being happy to take, Chelsea's, being part of Chelsea's wage structure, which is a lot more limited, of course, than the Saudi Pro League, where players are on gargantuan wages, tax-free as well. So from a money perspective, that makes a lot of sense. But of course, like we were saying, Chelsea offer a very stacked forward line. They offer a project which is determined to get back into the Champions League. Entertaining style of football under Enzo Maresca as well, and of course the chance to play in the Premier League. Going head to head with someone like Erling Haaland for the Golden Boot. I think two very attractive offers there for Osimhen for different reasons, but it really depends on whether Chelsea can, first of all, convince Osimhen and then meet Napoli's valuation of him. A couple of potential deals that have just, popped up here. Ooh. Sky Sports reporting that Lille are showing an interest in signing free agent Dele, of course, previously of Everton. I don't know, that jumps out to me, just in light of Angel Gomez getting that call up to the England squad. We've seen him thrive there. Of course, Dele, a fair amount older, but, that could be an interesting one. He obviously has ambitions of making the 2026 World Cup squad. What a comeback that would be. So that's something to keep an eye on. And also, if I scroll up, there is another one. Maxwell Cornet en route to Southampton for a medical from West Ham as well. That's a loan deal, I believe.
Interesting.
Lots of deals happening at the moment, or interest being shown in the final hours. It does feel like it's going to be quite busy in the final 5 hours of the window.
Well, we'll try our best to keep you up to date with all of those moves. The Dele one's particularly interesting because it feels like he's never really, due to injury, had much of an opportunity at Everton. And Lille have the offer of Champions League football. Yes, they've lost Paulo Fonseca, their manager, who's gone to Milan this summer. Bruno Genesio's come in there, but he'd have the opportunity to play with like Edin Zagrova, who looks really, really exciting, their right winger. Jonathan David's still there as well. So maybe a change of scene after everything Delhi's been through and what he revealed in that interview with Gary Neville as well. It'd be an amazing opportunity for him to rebuild his career after what has been a difficult couple of seasons for him. Matisse, let's get back to Chelsea and talk about outgoings, because it's been an interesting summer to say the least. Some players clearly not training with the first team squad due to the size of the squad. One of those players is Raheem Sterling. Why do you think Raheem Sterling's moved to Chelsea? And it's a big question. Why do you think it hasn't worked out?
I think part of it is Chelsea potentially overestimating what Sterling could bring to the team in general in regards to the way it was set up initially, because at City, Sterling was surrounded by a very, very good system with Pep, but also other world-class players where any of his deficiencies weren't showcased so much because other players would step up as well, and in turn he would also provide really good goal output. And, you know, if he wasn't playing well, he'd be substituted. If he was, he'd be playing. But it wasn't so much pressure, whereas with Chelsea, I felt like he was almost asked to lead that attack, that new attack under the ownership, and it was maybe just too much responsibility, especially for a player that started at 16, 17 at Liverpool, has had a lot of mileage now in his career in terms of the amount of games he's played. We know that it's a very tough league in terms of the tackles that fly in on wingers and the lack of protection sometimes they feel that they get. And he is a player that has stood the test of time, gone to multiple international tournaments, and he was always, for me, going to start to decline in his late 20s and going into his 30s. So I feel like Chelsea just maybe misstepped that one a little bit. And yeah, I think now that the wage structure's come in under the new directors, it really doesn't make sense to have a player that's on the decline, isn't consistent in front of goal, isn't consistent in his actions. That doesn't, for me, in a long-term project, it doesn't make sense. He's contracted till 2027, I believe, and Chelsea have obviously stacked now with loads of other options. So I think it's still a good opportunity for a team like an Arsenal. We've seen links there. Man United has kind of gone cold, but for a team that maybe need cover for Saka, experience to come off the bench, chasing a title against Manchester City, I think it could be an option. Again, there's not loads of responsibility, but at times called upon, he could deliver something for them. Yeah,
absolutely. I feel like it has been an unfortunate spell at Chelsea, but I think it'd be foolish to write him off too early, given everything he achieved at Man City in particular, given the managerial turnover there's been at Chelsea, the amount of players brought in. But it does feel like, I think you're right, that Chelsea have moved beyond him now. And those signings from that first window of Bowley and Clearlake, you know, the likes of Aubameyang, Koulibaly, Sterling, it wasn't a successful window, and it now feels like Chelsea have moved past all those players, or the majority of them at least. I mean, Mikey, Matisse mentions there Raheem Sterling to Arsenal. There has been a little bit of speculation today that could be on the cards at some stage. Are you with Matisse that he could be an interesting pickup for Arsenal?
Yeah, I do think so. In fact, we've had a question in from the chat from Olajide saying, why is Arsenal not signing a forward player?
This could be the forward player.
This has been the one that was live earlier, but then we saw Darmesh say earlier that a potential deal for Raheem Sterling or Kingsley Coman is not expected to happen at this stage. So it feels like Arsenal's business could be done, and I think that is a little bit of a worry for Arsenal's title chances. You know, there isn't really any cover for Bukayo Saka on the right. There isn't really much cover either for Martin Ødegaard in the centre. You've obviously got Trossard backing up Martinelli on the left, and Trossard can also play in a kind of false nine position. You know, he's fully capable of playing in the centre as well. So he's got quite a lot of covering to do. Of course, Gabby Jesus and Havertz there. Marino signing, or despite that recent injury, means that Havertz, you know, in an ideal world, will not have to play as an advanced 8 at any point. So that helps them out there. But it still feels worrying that Bukayo Saka is going to have to play almost every game of what could be, you know, could end up being a 65-game season this year with those extra Champions League games if Arsenal were to go far in multiple tournaments. Yeah, it is a little bit of a worry, and I think Arsenal fans are feeling that a little bit going into this season, especially given, you know, the start that Savinho's made at Man City, you know, the fact that Gundogan's come back in
for them
as well. You know, Man City suddenly look like, quite worthy title favourites once again, when a lot of our heads were being turned by Arsenal by their early business with Calafiori, with Mourinho having been on the cards for the last 2 weeks as well. But back to Sterling, I think Sterling would have been a really, really able backup for Saka. Obviously, can play has played the majority of his best football off the left as well. But and also operates really well in central areas. I think he would have been a really, really good utility backup for Arsenal. Obviously, the wages are massive, but if they could have found an arrangement that suits both parties, I think Sterling entering a side which is, has sustained a really, really high attacking level over the last few years, which is going for multiple trophies this year, working with Mikel Arteta again, of course, have a great relationship from their Man City days. They won so much together there. I wouldn't be surprised to see Sterling, regain some of that form that we saw at City, because yes, he's, not getting any younger and has played a lot of football, having, started his top-level career at, 16, 17 at Liverpool. I just still think there's something in there. Like Matisse, I mean, you've watched a lot more of him than I would have, being a Chelsea fan over the last 2 years. But there were, 2-month periods where Sterling, looked like one of Chelsea's best attackers. And I feel like that, that slipped off towards the end of last season. There were questions about his attitude in game in terms of, taking penalties off players, maybe
not
being
swearing,
not swearing the ball.
Wolves,
but I still feel like there is a top player in there. It was only 3 years ago that he was dragging England into the Euro 2020 final. And I feel like under the right manager in the right system, I do think he can thrive again. But I think it has to be a club like Arsenal. We were seeing
settled.
We were seeing like links with Man United earlier. I don't think that's a right fit. I think he needs to go into a winning team.
I agree. I think with Sterling at this point of his career, it's important that he goes somewhere, like you said, where the system is set. The cohesion and the chemistry in the team that he's going into is already there. There's not a load of new signings. It's not a new project, like you said. And I think to talk about Arsenal as well, with the depth that they've lost with Nketiah leaving, Smith-Rowe leaving, Vieira's gone back out on loan to Porto as well. It feels like Arsenal, in terms of depth, people that they can call upon, they've actually gone down in numbers, and the games have certainly not come down. Champions League is a new format that's going to be very taxing. So I'm not sure if they have another plan, if they've obviously gone cold on Sterling, they've got another idea in their heads, but I definitely feel like something's got to give for Arsenal in terms of players coming in that attack line, especially when we look at Jesus having injury issues as well over the last couple of seasons. Martinelli's not really been informed for around about a year. It feels like he's been in a bit of a dip. I think Arsenal are putting themselves under a little bit of pressure if they don't bring someone in.
Yeah, I think most Arsenal fans were saying a forward and you're getting up to a sort of 8, 9 out of 10 window for them. But have they left themselves a little bit short, especially with Man City looking, as Mikey says, so strong at the start of this window? Let's talk about some of the other players that have left Chelsea already, Matisse. In Conor Gallagher, Ian Maatson, Amari Hutchinson. There's obviously a clear strategy to bankroll the incomings with Chelsea Academy graduates. Do you think Chelsea have made any mistakes in letting some of these players go?
I think I actually cast my mind back to Lewis Hall, who is really now starting at Newcastle at left back. I really believe that the talent is top tier. I think he could be England's starting left back in a few years to come. He was only 18 when he was coming into our side, playing big games against Man United, Man City. And I just think if maybe Maresca had been here earlier, he might have seen the technical quality that he has, and he might have brought him into the side to play this kind of inverted left-back role that he's played at times. And of course, we used to play centre midfield in our academy. But I think when it comes to players like Maatson and Gallagher, they are very good players. I think they could have been rotation options at least for us and filled in. But they're not world-class players where they're irreplaceable. I think Chelsea's biggest thing is the players that they bring in, like the Dewsbury Halls, the Sassis, Badia Shills over the years. Those players have to show and prove that they are upgrades on what we've lost. If they don't become upgrades to what we've lost, that's when people will do comparisons and they'll start to question the recruitment, because you don't want to be getting rid of players that, could help you and have helped you in Conor Gallagher if you're not going to then go to the next level and push on, get into Champions League, get back to challenging for Premier League titles, winning trophies, because these guys are getting good moves. I think the Gallagher move was brilliant for him to go to Atletico Madrid. Diego Simeone is exactly the type of football that suits his game. There's motorbikes coming out in the intro.
The unveiling was awesome.
Fireworks. Do you know what I mean? So I'm glad that he's getting that love. I think he deserves it. I think he was much improved last season. I think he he's a credit. You know, he maximised on everything that he had in terms of attributes. He had a great loan at Palace. It's not everybody that has to retire at Chelsea, but at the same time, Chelsea's recruitment, the amount of players they've signed, high volume, they've got to get into the top 4 this season. They've got to push on.
Yeah, absolutely. I found myself getting a little bit emotional when I was watching his goodbye video, having joined the club aged 8. We do have some breaking news. We've got Sky Sports News on a screen just over here, and we're hearing that Newcastle are in talks to sign Anthony Elanga of Nottingham Forest. That would be quite a turnout for the books this late on in the window. Of course, Anthony Elanga came through at Man United, shone really under Ralph Rangnick. It was probably the only player that really stepped up in that period. And Mikey, it was looking like Forest had really good attacking options this year. They were trying to sign Santiago Jimenez of Feyenoord. That doesn't look like it's going to happen now. But they had some settled attackers. You know, Gibbs White's just been called up into the senior England squad. Losing Anthony Elanga this late would be not great for Forest.
Yeah, not great at all. We're hearing now that they're exploring a deal that could cost upwards of £35 million. So not a small fee for Elanga, and Forest would be making a significant profit on him if that were the case. But yeah, of course, it would be a blow to Forest, absolutely. But they have been very active this window. You wouldn't necessarily put it past them to get in a replacement last minute, although I think finding a replacement of Elanga's quality would be really difficult. But we'll see, you know, time ticking in the transfer window as well, you know, whether Newcastle can get, you know, a deal over the line, because Forest can kind of charge what they want for Elanga at this point. I know, you know, PSR issues last year, you know, could be coming into play, but that was all sorted in June. But, you know, is this an offer that's too good to turn down? We'll have to wait and see. But I think from a Newcastle perspective, this would be a very, very welcome. I mean, we've been talking for a long time about how they need to upgrade in that right-wing position. It's the one position in that forward line which, you know, isn't as stacked. Of course, you know, you've got Anthony Gordon, who's had an amazing 12 months, and Harvey Barnes backing him up on the left. Of course, the quality of Isak, you know, at centre forward, but as admirable a job as sorry, I completely forgot to Miguel Almiron has done under Eddie Howe. It does feel like they could do with an upgrade there in terms of consistent output, in terms of someone who can kind of play off the last man, in terms of someone who can really drive from the right wing. And I think Anthony Elanga, you know, has that Premier League experience, has that quality, and has been part of a really cohesive attack at Nottingham Forest. I think this would be a great move for both him and Newcastle were it to happen, but we'll keep you guys updated over the next half hour if there are any developments there. Let's get on to a couple of questions though that we've had. David Brooks says, by tomorrow Chelsea might have Osimhen, Neto, Felix, Palmer, Noni Madueke, Sancho and Nkunku in their starting lineup. I mean, I don't think...
Not in the
starting
What
lineup.
formation are you playing?
I think David Brooks might have misspelt that. But quite an upgrade and can easily compete to be in the top 4. Would you say, Matisse, that now top 4, you know, has to be the minimum requirement of this Chelsea side? If they get Osimhen? If they get Osimhen, yeah.
I think
Sancho.
Even if they don't, I think it needs to be the minimum requirement. For me, since the season kind of was coming to a start, I was always feeling that Chelsea need to be back in the Champions League, not just from a status standpoint, but also a financial standpoint. You know how much that competition brings in terms of revenue, and also in terms of attracting players as well and keeping people on side. Cole Palmer's had a great season. He's got a new contract, but if Chelsea were to continue to keep missing out on the Champions League repeatedly, and he was to continue to put up those numbers, at some point a big club's going to come calling, and then there's doubt and there's questions. So I think Chelsea, just as a club, have to be back in that competition. And I think in regards to that forward line, it is stacked. I don't think we even mentioned Mudryk. Mudryk is another one that's also there as well. So, you know, luckily Chelsea, it has worked in their favour to be in the Conference League, even though it's not what, as a supporter, I wanted to be in the Europa League when we were going for it last season. But obviously, being in the Conference League allows them to have these games, these extra fixtures, to play these guys, to get them, hopefully, their momentum and their confidence up as well. And yeah, it should be fun to watch, but we definitely have to make sure the balance is right between attack and the defence. Chelsea have conceded 6 goals in 3 of their fixtures. Well, in totality, they've conceded 4 goals in the Prem, and obviously 2 goals, you know, on Thursday night. And even in that home game in the Conference League, we could have easily conceded 2 goals there as well when we was watching the shots, kind of going towards our goal. So Chelsea defensively have got to tighten up. Their defence last season was really poor, putting record statistics up in the Premier League under Poch. Like you said, the attack was really good. So finding that balance for Maresca is key. Because, we can't score 5 goals, 6 goals every game. As much as I would love to see that.
I mean, you definitely might have the forward options to do it. But, we'll see what happens. Mikey, I believe you've also got a little update from Carve about... some quotes about the Sancho situation.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is more kind of Carve's take on it, but he's saying that I think the reason Chelsea are going for him is that it's an opportunistic move. Sancho would be available, quote, for a sensible fee, and on his day, he's a very good player, as we were alluding to earlier, Carve alluding to, getting into the Champions League final for Borussia Dortmund, the fact that he was an £85 million player just 3 years ago, and that, if Enzo Maresca can get the best out of him, the Chelsea owners will back him as well. It would be a real... get kind of brownie points as well from Maresca, I guess, if he's able to kind of revive his career in this Chelsea attack. I mean, I think that there is logic to this move, but ultimately it depends on what kind of deal Chelsea are to strike for him. We say a sensible fee, is that £30 million, is that £40 million? You don't expect that anything above Chelsea would pay anything above £40 million, given the amount of money that they've spent already on forwards this summer and in previous summers, especially if they are to make an outlay for Victor Osimhen as well. It just feels like an awful lot. And if Sancho isn't immediately coming into this team as a starter, then it's hard to see where the game time is going to come from. But of course, you've got Conference League minutes there. Maybe Sancho would be eased into first team action in that sense too. That seems to be the logic from a Chelsea standpoint.
There we have it. I mean, let's quickly, before we get into maybe talk about some of the completed deals of the window so far, Chukwuemeka?
Yes.
Trevor Chalobah? Ben Chilwell? Do you see them all getting moves before the window closes, or do you think they'll just be, not training with the first team?
Yeah, this is a concern, because I think Chelsea have had this list kind of for a while now, for a few weeks, and with the manager being so open, and I've actually it's been a breath of fresh air to hear him kind of speak really openly and kind of just, there's no kind of grey area with him. You either know you're part of the plan or you're not, and I think it's good for players to know that they're not if they aren't, so they can start to picture where their future lies next season. There isn't any confusion, but it also potentially does allow other clubs to be alerted to, there's a bargain here, or these guys are desperate and they are not training with the first team, so we can go in at the 11th hour with a cheeky deal. That really, we should be getting more potentially. I think Ben Chilwell, he has had a lot of injury issues, but he can still do a good job for a Premier League team. But there probably will be loan offers coming in now, not obligation to buy, it's definitely options, and just clubs trying to take a chance on some of these players that I think have got quality. I think Chukwuemeka's a great talent. I really actually would have liked him to stay, but because of his injuries last year, he hasn't really had much game time. He probably needs to get regular first-team football, as we've spoken about with all the attacking options. There's no room. Chalobah, really good player as well. Had some good performances at the back end of last season as well. And I think, again, could do a great job for a Premier League team. But I think these deals, if they do materialise, they're going to be cheeky. They're going to be cheeky deals, loans, and potentially Chelsea having to pay some of those wages as well. At least 50%, I think, for Chilwell. Most mid-table clubs won't want to pay more than $100,000 a week to a left-back. So it's going to be interesting to see how it goes. I hope as many of them can go as possible, because it's not healthy to have these guys training in a separate group for the whole season. But I definitely think there will be some players that will be left behind if the deadline just arrives too soon. Datro Fofana is there. We've seen Washington potentially looks like he's going to be going to Strasbourg. Petrovic just about made it to Strasbourg as well. But there are a couple players. Angelo still hasn't moved, so we'll see.
I mean, it's interesting you mentioned Trevor Chalobah there. We saw some reports earlier suggesting that Crystal Palace were considering potentially a loan move for Trevor Chalobah, and like you say, maybe if that was to transpire, it would be at the 11th hour. That's in light of Chadi Riyad, their signing from Real Betis, a left-sided centre-back, sustaining a knee injury in their 4-0 win over Norwich earlier this week. So they're considering whether to reinforce again. Of course, they've got Maxence Lacroix in from Wolfsburg, effectively the Joachim Andersen replacement. Of course, Joachim Andersen going to Fulham. Just seen kind of further news from Sky Sports that Napoli have asked for an increased bid from Ahli in the Saudi Pro League. So again,
wow,
this Osimhen to Chelsea or Ahli is very much a live situation here. So yeah, really keep your eyes on the Osimhen situation. I think this could be, if something goes through here, I think this could be one of the biggest deadline day stories we've seen in years, to be honest. Also, I mean, Billy Gilmore, Chelsea to Napoli, that's a report that's been live today as well. If that was to... Brighton to Napoli, sorry, yeah. But if that agreement was to go through, another, Chelsea Academy boy.
Yeah.
So, yeah, keep an eye on that too. But yeah, I guess where do you want to go next, Steve?
Well, I actually had a bit of breaking news to break as well, which I've been told about on Sky Sports News, that Ange Postecoglou has made clear that Giovanni Lo Celso won't be amongst his first team training squad if he doesn't get a move before the end of the window. Real Betis are supposedly moving along with their idea to bring him in on loan. Giovanni Lo Celso has played for Real Betis before. Obviously, that spell at Spurs has been dominated a little bit by injuries, been out on loan to Villarreal. But there was definitely a really good player in there at PSG, so it'd be great to see him get back on track for sure. What I thought we could do is maybe talk about some of the completed deals that have gone through already this summer. And of course, we will be keeping you up to date with the situation around Osimhen, Sterling, Sancho, Ivan Toney in the remaining part of this stream. But let's chat about some of the completed deals. Maybe a ranking maybe seems a little harsh, but Matisse, the most expensive one completed so far this summer is Dominic Solanke to Spurs.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about that as a move?
I think it's great for the player. He had a great season last season. He put up his highest tally of his career in the Premier League at Bournemouth. I think it's warranted talk about England, and I think going to Tottenham is a great step, because Tottenham have been looking for that figure since Harry Kane. Richarlison came in for a similar amount of money and didn't do it in his first season. It feels like he's going to be a bit part rotational player going forward. Son is getting older. We know that he's been moved from wide to striker at times. He had a great weekend last weekend, but he can only do it for so much longer. So there is a baton to kind of take in that forward line and kind of carry the next Tottenham team. And it's a very young, exciting team they're building. It is open. It can be, a bit risky at times to play, but there are some talented players in there. Sarr in the midfield, Pedro Porro was a great signing, Udogie. So I think for him, it's a test, and it's the perfect test for him. And if he takes that step up, then fantastic. If not, then then Tottenham will have to go into the market again. But I think a lot of Tottenham's expensive signings have not worked, whether it's Richarlison or Ndombele. So they kind of do need this one to definitely work out. But I think it's a smart. I think the fee's a bit inflated, I must say. I think the fee's a bit too high, especially when we're seeing Toney's fee today as well. I think it's better value for money. But if he bangs in 20 goals, then they won't care.
Yeah, he's under a certain amount of pressure, though, because last year, as you right to point out, 19 league goals. But that was his first year of doing it really in the Premier League. He'd had great years in the Championship before. He's had difficult spells at big clubs as well. Was really highly rated when he was coming through at Chelsea. But I think it was 1 goal in 27 games for Liverpool during that time there. Was very much a bit part player there, so don't want to be too harsh on him there. But last year, his stats at Bournemouth were absolutely amazing. He was in the top 10 in Europe for most shots. I think his XG per 90 was between Mo Salah and Darwin Núñez. So they were competing for a quadruple. Dominic Solanke was, playing for mid-table Bournemouth. So respect to him, and as you say, I think he earned that move to Spurs, and hopefully it works out for him. Mikey, let's talk about some of Man United's completed business, because you're a Man United fan. I think most people would say you've had a very, very good window. Mazraoui, De Ligt, Yoro, Ugarte. You must be delighted.
Yeah, I think it's certainly been a very active window, and Ineos have really set a marker down. I think a lot of the talk, towards the end of last season, with Ineos still, fighting to get Dan Ashworth in place, or waiting for him to complete his gardening leave, and those disputes with Newcastle over compensation. Wilcox coming in relatively late as well. It felt like all the pieces of the United hierarchy were taking a little while to fall in place, and there was lots of talk about PSR and whether United actually would have much money to spend this summer at all. And actually, United have been very active, and I think really what's facilitated that has been the sales that United have made. McTominay going to Napoli this week for I think a really, really good fee, and I think United have brought in, I think, over 100 million euros worth of sales, which is, I think, by a distance now the biggest selling summer United have had in the post-Ferguson era, and that has meant that they've been able to actually outlay over 200 million euros worth of spending. So, yeah, I think that's probably been the most positive thing, is that United under Ineos have shown themselves to be kind of canny operators in the market. Whether all these signings come off is another thing. Whether they're exactly the right profile that United need is another thing. I think Joshua Zirkzee, especially in light of the Højlund injury, I think is a really useful player to have around, has arrived for a great fee. Is he the exact type of striker who's going to take United's attack to the next level? I'm not so sure. Matthijs de Ligt, again, arrives for a great fee, has worked with Erik ten Hag before as well.
Point to prove.
A point to prove, definitely. And he comes with a lot of pressure because, there are, fairly significant kind of voices who say that, he ultimately didn't live up to expectation at Juve. He ultimately didn't live up to expectation at Bayern Munich. But I think people also forget where Man United are right now. They finished 8th last year, the worst performance in Premier League history at the club. And so to be able to get Matthijs de Ligt through the door, who is, at the very least, a defender who is worthy of playing in the latter stages of the Champions League, I think that is still a statement. I don't think that, going to Juventus and not becoming one of the 3 best centre-backs in world football, I don't think that is a slight on his name. And I think at points during his Juventus and Bayern Munich careers, he was considered, among the top 5 centre-backs in world football, even if he dropped off a little bit last season. So I think that's a great move as well. The Lenny Yoro deal, which is the most lucrative of all of them, of course, is unfortunate due to that injury that's due to keep him out until November now.
Injuries.
But of course, there were reports that United, were aware of an issue ahead of signing him as well. So, I think the club probably does have to take that responsibility as well, but of course can't necessarily account for the injury being as bad, or that he sustained being as bad as it is. So that's very much one for the future, but it is a big outlay. But again, another statement. So yeah, I think United's business overall has been positive, and of course Manuel Ugarte coming in this week as well from PSG. Again, is he going to be the kind of progressive midfielder that United need as a number 6? Not so sure, because that wasn't what we saw from PSG, but he was putting up the kind of tackle and interception numbers at PSG and at Sporting CP before that we were seeing from N'Golo Conte in his prime. So in terms of out-and-out defensive midfielder, a destroyer who can help free up players around him, then Ugarte looks pretty positive as well. And most importantly, he was United's top midfield target, and they remained patient, they didn't panic, and they eventually got a deal over the line.
And for a not crazy inflated fee, because Man United in the past, in the final weeks of the window, have often overpaid quite dramatically for players as well. And hopefully it's the sort of signing that can really get the best out of Kobbie Mainoo as well. I think him and Garnacho's emergence last season for Man United was really the only bright spots of a pretty miserable campaign, along with that FA Cup win, of course, as well. Matisse, I want to get your thoughts on a Chelsea signing that divides opinion a lot online in Joao Felix.
Yes.
He's obviously had that loan spell at you guys the back end of the year before last. Were you pleased to see him back at the Bridge, or did you just think, do we really need him?
I think both things can be true, because I like Felix a lot. I like him as a player. I've been a big fan of him since he was at Benfica, when he was kind of touted as the golden boy. Obviously earned that, very big fee to go to Atletico Madrid for over £100 million. But in regards to, again, needing him, I feel like it's not necessarily a need. It's almost, again, stockpiling in that part of the pitch. But he is a player that needed someone, he needed a club to go to. He needed a new place to kind of call home after the Atletico Madrid situation. The last few years, he's been basically away from that team. Barcelona, he hasn't been able to secure a permanent deal. And I think the talent's there. It's a calculated risk for me because, again, similar to Sancho, there is a player in there. It's can Maresca and can Chelsea unlock it? And maybe the more you surround these players with other technical players to link up with and to combine with, the better for all of them. But I've always liked the player. It was great to see him get a goal on his debut there back with us against Wolves.
Finish.
It was a great finish. And I think his loan spell at Chelsea previously, he had moments where he was unlucky. I think at times the stats may not have been on his side, but I remember hitting the bar numerous times.
Hit the post a lot, didn't he?
He hit the post a lot. He hit the crossbar a lot. And he is pleasing to watch on the eye. He has got a nutmeg in him and he has got flair in his game. And as long as he puts the output there as well this season, when he's called upon, I don't think he's got the pressure to start every game. He just does need to make an impact when he comes off the bench. But I've always been a fan of the player, and I am happy to see him back. More than anything, I just want his career to just get back to what I think it could have become when he left Benfica. And if that's with us, then that's fantastic. But yeah.
We'll see. You know, he's had an unlucky time with injury as well, but there is so much talent with Joao Felix. There always is. Guys, we're doing 10 minutes more on this stream, maybe even a bit longer if there's some big breaking news, but get your questions in the chat for the final 10 minutes. We're going to do a recap of the major deals that have been completed during the day. So Sam Johnston's gone to Wolves and Ramsdale's spell at Arsenal is over. He's joined Southampton. But other than that, we're waiting for the big deals to be completed. There is a lot of a situation, well, there's a big situation developing with Chelsea strikers. Ivan Toney has agreed a deal with Ahli, but Chelsea are potentially going to see him as a backup if they can't get Victor Osimhen. Mikey, if people are just tuning in now, what is the kind of situation with Victor Osimhen and Ivan Toney? Because it doesn't feel like Ahli, they can't sign both unless something changes.
No, Ahli can't sign both, or at least it doesn't look like they're going to sign both, even if they were to be able to work out a way of offloading a foreign player to get them both in the side. That doesn't look like that's going to happen. The reports throughout the day have been that they are not looking to sign both. So, get in the poll, by the way, that's at the top of the chat. At the moment, you all are saying, 54% of you are saying that Victor Osimhen is not going to sign for Chelsea ahead of the deadline. Earlier, that was 53% in favour of him signing, so it has changed. It's very, very tight, but at the moment, it does look favourable to Chelsea because the Ivan Toney to Ahli deal is really advanced. Medical's completed. If all goes to plan,
it's just been completed in the final few minutes.
If all goes to plan, he is going to be an Ahli player. And that Osimhen deal to Ahli, with Napoli demanding, a higher fee than was originally agreed earlier today, looks to be in total standby. It looks like Chelsea could have the upper hand here if they can convince Osimhen to join, if they can meet Napoli's valuation. It could be really, really exciting times for Chelsea striker prospects. We've also had Darmesh Seth confirming that Real Sociedad are in advanced talks to sign West Ham United defender Naya Fagerd. So that's some breaking news there. We've also had some breaking news recently about Anthony Elanga. Newcastle in talks to sign him from Newcastle,
from
Nottingham Forest. Transfer deadline day has taken its toll on my brain. I really needed another coffee before coming in here. But back to the Jadon Sancho situation as well. Seen some reports online that Chelsea have submitted two different offers, one being an option to buy from a loan and one being an obligation to buy. So that's very much in motion as well. It's understood that Sancho's keen on a move to Chelsea, of course, the club that he grew up supporting. So it's all kicking off here, and it is really centred around Chelsea in terms of these deals very much being live. I guess we can bring it back to Chelsea, Matisse. If Sancho and Osimhen sign tonight, do you think this has been, a 9, 10 out of 10 window from a Chelsea perspective?
That's a good question.
That's a good question.
Or where would you rate Chelsea?
Yeah.
How would you mark it out of 10?
I think with the goalkeeping situation, I think it's a concern. So I don't think I could go as high as a 9 or a 10, purely because that's part of the spine that a lot of us coming into this window would have said needs to be looked at. We need to see if the goalkeeper is going to be of a level which we can kind of hang our hat on to be one of the best defences in the league. And I think still pursuing with Sanchez is up for question. We're going to see if Maresca can bring the best out of him, but I've got concerns. There are mistakes in his game, even when he is playing well, and obviously saw his move away from Brighton. So I think with the defence as it is at the moment, there's a lot of question marks as to whether we've improved enough. But the attack is fantastic, so you can't disregard the attack. If you bring in Osimhen, which is a starting level and starting quality striker, you brought in Felix. I think Neto is really one of the best deals we've done. I was really excited when he came in. He has an injury record, of course, but I think his quality was there to be seen when he was at Wolves. Anytime a big club kind of played against Wolves, he was usually the star guy for Wolves to kind of cause the most problems. Great decision making, again, was involved in the last goal that assisted for Joao Felix against Wolves as well. So I think a 7 is kind of where I'm sitting at, 7.5. The reason why I won't go any higher is purely the goalkeeper and purely the outgoings, because I think bringing in is great, but I think if you don't sell Sterling, if you aren't getting Chilwell, moved on, if you still have an excess of players around the first team squad just lingering around for the first 6 months, as much as we've said it's not going to be an issue because they're training apart, they're still collecting those wages and they're still here. So I think it needs to be kind of managed a bit better, and I think we have to look at ourselves and reflect and say, could we have managed that situation better? Could we have maybe told them they weren't part of the plans earlier, etc., to try and make sure that they weren't here past the deadline? So, yeah.
I've got a big question for you as well. Let's imagine a scenario where Victor Osimhen and Jadon Sancho arrive, Raheem Sterling leaves before the end of the window. Have Chelsea had the best transfer window in the Premier League for you?
That's a great question.
Thinking about
I think out of everyone, we've probably improved the most. I'm trying to think because Arsenal have not done a lot. I think Calafiori is a good signing, but they obviously need someone in attack. Man City haven't done loads, but again, they look good. I think in terms of improvement, the attack has improved by a very significant amount, especially with the players that we brought in there. So I'd say that, yeah, we're right up there to be the best, but I don't want to diminish a Brighton or, because they've done business. As Brighton have done a lot of business. I think Fulham have done some interesting business as well. Anderson, I think, is a really good signing. I wasn't actually expecting that one to go through. I thought Anderson might even, some of the top 6 clubs might even look at an Anderson. I was really impressed with some of his performances last season, notably at Anfield. I thought he was incredible that day as well. So, yeah, I think there's some other clubs in the middle of the table that will definitely have something to say about being, having the best window. But I think we'd be right up there. Yeah.
I do think Victor Osimhen would move the dial considerably, in favour of Chelsea in terms of that. This is a player that over the last 4 seasons has a comparable minutes per goal ratio to Harry Kane, which is pretty remarkable. And obviously Victor Osimhen's played far fewer games because he does have a bit of an injury record, which is a slight concern. But that is a record, to be very proud of, especially given the fact that Harry Kane scored 36 league goals alone last year for Bayern Munich. To be comparable, I think it's only 5 minutes difference, is really, really impressive. So we'll see what happens with Victor Osimhen in the final few hours of the window. It has really been a saga for the ages, Mikey. It's been a lot of fun. Let's wrap up today's show quickly, I suppose, with the latest about Jadon Sancho. Dharmesh Seth basically suggests that it would be a loan with an obligation to buy. There hasn't really been any update since then.
No huge updates, but it does look again that this is a deal that that is very, very possible. It feels like, at least from the reports that we've been seeing, that it's almost more likely to happen than not. Sancho seems to be in favour of the move. Man United, of course, Dharmesh was saying this week that United are happy to offload him and not bring in a replacement. Ten Hag seems to be happy with his wide options as he has them. So yeah, this feels like a move that without a spanner being thrown in the works should in theory get done today. That seems to really be in motion. Just another update, Forest have rejected Newcastle's offer for Anthony Elanga. Let's remember as well, Newcastle did try to sign Elanga earlier in the window with Elliot Anderson moving to Forest. So that deal seems to, have been put on hold. I mean, it's an audacious bid, isn't it, at the 11th hour?
Yes.
To try and sign
I don't think there's a huge surprise there.
Not a huge surprise. So we'll see whether Newcastle come back with an improved bid. Maybe this is all part of their game plan. Like you said, Doogie as well. Toney has passed his Ahli medical, so that seems to be very likely to be completed as well. Although we're also hearing from Sky Sports that they're under no pressure to conclude that deal today. Of course,
the window continues.
The Saudi window doesn't close until Monday night, so no pressure from their perspective. If they want to take their time with that deal, then that's up to them. They know that they're not going to have any European competitors after the deadline tonight, or at least no English competitors after the deadline tonight. So that's all the latest on those deals.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, it's quite ridiculous to think that Ahli, they might not end up with Victor Osimhen, but they still might end up with Ivan Toney, Bobby Firmino and Riyad Mahrez, which is quite a front line for that standard of league as well. But guys, thank you so much for watching the Transfer Show live on Sky Sports Premier League, sponsored by Sky Mobile. Huge thank you to Micah McCubbin as ever, and for all your contributions throughout this window. But to special guest Matisse, thank you so much, Matisse.
Thank you very much.
It's been brilliant to have you on. Guys, stay abreast with all the latest news, rumours on Sky Sports News as the window continues until 11 p.m. tonight. We'll see you soon.